will allow me that. So great to have everybody here. With that, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. I'm not aware of any changes.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Eric. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? The agenda is approved. Okay, our first item this evening is a presentation from Clive Community Services. We have Stephanie Horak to join us. Stephanie, welcome.
One moment, Mary. I'm going to bring Stephanie into the meeting. Stephanie, can you hear us all right?
Yes, I can. Thank you for having us.
Glad to have you here, Stephanie. Thank you.
So I believe that you received a packet in your packet of information in your board packet from us. And Lisa is online, I think, also to give you some more information than what you already have received. So can we bring Lisa in at this time?
Lisa, this is Pete. Can you hear us okay?
Hi, yeah, I can hear you.
Well, good evening, Lisa. Please proceed and share with us. Glad to have you with us.
All right, thanks for taking the time to hear from us. I wanted to give you all a quick snapshot of what we've been seeing at the pantry the past few weeks. In March, we had our second highest numbers ever at the pantry. Almost half of this was through a partnership with Embark, which is a local refugee organization. They delivered food for us to local families in need, and about half of those were Clive residents. So far in April, our numbers have been down, but we're expecting to see a spike in demand soon. We're expecting a lot of new clients due to the record unemployment levels, and that's where I wanted to ask for the city's support. I want to ask you to help us spread the word to people who haven't used us before so that everyone knows that we serve anyone who's in need of food and personal care items. There's not a proof of income or other kinds of eligibility. There's no residency requirements. We really are just here to serve anyone who's in need. All we ask is to see an ID for everyone that's being served. And the whole family doesn't even have to show up. They can just send one person on their behalf with IDs. And we want people to know that if the family themselves can't make it, they can even send a proxy if the hours we're open don't work, which is Mondays 4 to 7 and Fridays 9 to noon. And we just want help from everyone who can help us get the word out, because we're expecting a lot of people who have never considered needing us to need us now or very soon. So if you can just help us get that message out to the community, we would greatly appreciate it.
Certainly glad to help any way that we can, and appreciate the fact that you're having an extensive usage now. Boy, it's hard to believe, and not to get in the middle of things here, but Lisa, the pantry has been in full operation for, is it 3 years now? Or is it more?
I think it's about 3.5 years.
Yeah, it goes fast. Okay, very good. Well, please proceed then.
All right.
May I chime in?
Please, yep, go ahead.
In addition to the word on the street thing that I put in your packet, I have a few more bits of information from the principal at Crestview. And these might be a little bit leaning towards school related, but might be of interest to you anyway. Of course, they have several individuals without internet, so that's a problem for learning. She reports that several families have traveled as far as Iowa City to get staples. Crestview is struggling to get the families to come out to get the lunches that they're handing out. She thinks it's because people are afraid. Many of the Latino families are struggling due to being out of work. They are working in cleaning and serving components of restaurants and hotels. Some people are hesitant to receive social services support because it may later impact their naturalization process. And she says there is a reliance on schools for information, for food, and for resources or connection to those resources. And then I have also from my friends at Booster Pack information about what they think the numbers are of kids coming reporting for those lunches. So at Crestview, they're only seeing about 50 come. Clive, they're seeing 60 or 70, Hillside, 60 or 70, and those are only the only 3 elementaries at which those are being passed out. Indian Hills and Stillwell are seeing about 70 or 80, and Valley is seeing about 200. And they're doing about 120 in home delivery for people who are quarantined or can't otherwise get to the distribution site. And that's all I had to add.
Okay, thank you. Lisa, did you have anything else to add?
No, that was it for me.
Well, thank you both. Very appreciative of the outstanding work that you're doing. I'm amazed at what you've been able to accomplish in a very short period of time. And so grateful for that. Council, are there questions for either Lisa or Stephanie?
I have one.
Go ahead, Susan.
So I heard you say that they're asked to show an ID, and I just was wondering what the purpose is of that. And then the other thing is, given the fear that some have of accepting help affecting their naturalization process, is this documented somehow that they've received help from our Clive Community Services?
The ID is part of the information that we ask to enter some demographics into DMARC's intake system. DMARC just wants to know how often people come for service, and they want some basic demographic information so that they can generate reports and just share with the broader community to say, we know that we have this percentage of clients are repeat customers, and these are new, and this is the areas of greater need within your community and so forth. So only for those type of reasons. And then we also, within our network of DMARC pantries, in typical times, we only let clients get the larger supply of DMARC food once a calendar month from one pantry site. So that way they couldn't go to Urbandale one week and us the next and West Des Moines the next. That's why we want to see an ID. But we still will provide food even if they don't show an ID. We ask that they do so that we can provide more service.
Other questions for Lisa or Stephanie?
Well, there was also that question about, is this documented in such a way that it could affect their naturalization process?
We don't ask their status as far as if they're a legal citizen of the US or not. So we don't track that sort of information. We just want some sort of ID. Some bring a passport, some bring an ID from another country, some bring a school or work ID. We just want some form of identification.
Okay, so they shouldn't have to be afraid then to accept some food.
They shouldn't have to be. That's not to say that some of them aren't afraid of that or have the wrong impression of what kind of ID we need or what we're doing with it. But in reality, they don't need to, because we don't ask if they're citizens or if they're here legally or anything like that.
Councilwoman Judkins, if I might jump in. I think the principal, when she was referring to that, I think she was referring to government types of social services. We are, of course, a private charity. We're a 501c3. DMARC, I believe, is also, and we don't concern ourselves with people's immigration status. And so people, like Lisa says, people should not worry about that at all.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Other questions, council? Hearing none, Lisa and Stephanie, thank you again for the great work that you're doing. Thank you for coming to share with the council and get them updated, particularly in this most incredible time of need. So keep up the great work, and thank you again for coming.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Okay, with that, we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is citizens' presentation. This is where anyone attending this meeting can address the council on an issue that is not currently on the agenda. Is there anybody here to do so?
Mayor, this is Pete. I would ask just if we give everybody a moment so I can watch for hands that might be going up. This time I'm also going to enable the chat functionality so that people, if you would like to sort of signal me by chat, you should be able to send me a chat if you need to as well. The hand raise is if you've clicked the participant tab at the bottom of your screen, you should see a little button that says raise hand. And I am now watching for that.
I'd just say again, is there anybody here to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda this evening? Please raise your hand electronically as Pete has described.
Mayor, I do not see anybody who's waiting to speak.
Okay, seeing none, we'll move to consent items. I'm aware of no changes there.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved by Eric, seconded by John. Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? That passes 5-0. Okay, now we'll move to action items. We have 4 public hearings this evening. The first one is a public hearing regarding the Deerfield Point rezoning. And Matthew, did we post appropriate public notice?
Yes, that notice was published March 20th in the Des Moines Register.
Thank you, Matthew. Doug?
One moment, please. Doug, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Good evening.
Good evening, Doug.
What you have before you tonight is the public hearing for the proposed rezoning project. However, because of the circumstances we find ourselves in, we were able to discuss with the developer the reasonable delay of this project. So at this point, you have the public hearing because we set it up last month. We would recommend that you simply close it, and in the future, as we're able to have a more traditional public hearing in which we can have members of our community more actively involved in the process, we'll bring this back to you and then deliberate on the proposed rezoning request, hopefully in May, but we'll just have to see how it goes.
Move to close the public hearing.
It's been moved by John to close the public hearing. Ted, is that a second?
Yeah, that's second.
Moved by John, seconded by Ted. Further discussion? Hearing none, will the council please vote? That passes 5-0 to close the public hearing. Doug, anything else on that?
Nothing at this time. Again, we are continuing to have discussions with the developer, trying to resolve any outstanding issues. And I know the developer is continuing to have some dialogue with the neighborhood groups. So we're hopeful that, again, when we're able to have an appropriate public hearing, that all the parties will be satisfied with the project, but we are still working on that now.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Doug. All right, then we'll move to action item number 2, the second public hearing regarding the City of Waukee gas main easement. And Matthew, did we publish appropriate public notice?
Yes, Your Honor, it was published March 23rd in the Des Moines Register.
Thank you, Matthew. And Matt, you have this one.
Thank you, Your Honor. Before the council this evening is the City of Waukee extending service in the area for their residents is in need of an easement for some gas main infrastructure along Alice's Road south of Meredith. The confines of the easement was outlined in the packet. One of the requirements that we have as a part of this easement is some landscaping improvements, some tree plantings associated with it. But we feel this has been a really good dialogue with the City of Waukee, and we would encourage the city council's consideration and approval of this easement.
Thank you, Matt. Council, questions?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
It's moved by John, seconded by Eric to close the public hearing. Further discussion? And before we do, is there anyone here to speak on this item?
One moment, Mayor, I'll take a quick look. No hands have gone up, sir.
Seeing none, will the council please vote? Passes 5-0 to close the public hearing.
I'd move the resolution.
Second.
It's moved by John, seconded by Eric. Further discussion? Hearing none, will the council please vote? And that passes 5-0. Thank you. Okay, the third item, third public hearing is regarding the 2019 sidewalk assessment assessment program for Polk County. And Matthew, did we publish appropriate public notice?
Yes, Your Honor. This was published March 20th and again March 27th in the Des Moines Register.
Thanks, Matthew. And I believe you have this one.
Yep. Yeah, before you tonight is the consideration of a resolution that will fix amounts to be assessed on properties that have outstanding invoices due from the 2019 annual sidewalk repair program. I'd also like to point out at this time too that we need to note that this is a public hearing tonight, and beyond the usual method of notification, we did an additional direct mailing to the property owners, alerting them to the virtual nature of tonight's meeting. So we also provided instructions for them to participate. I don't know that anybody is here to do so, but that option is out there. With that being said, there are 9 properties who have elected to have the city's contractor perform needed sidewalk repairs. They also chose to allow the amount due for those repairs to go to assessment, as opposed to making a direct payment to the city. I should also point out that there was actually one property owner who called just prior to this meeting and did pay his assessment. So I'll be striking that one off of the schedule. With that, I recommend approval of the resolution and would be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Matthew. Council, any questions?
Move to close the public hearing.
Have we got any feedback from any of the residents on hardships or any of that nature due to the COVID virus?
I have not heard of any, no.
Thank
Move
you.
to close the public hearing.
Second.
Yeah, it's moved by John, seconded by Eric to close the public hearing. Now, is there any further discussion?
One moment, Mayor, I'll watch for hands. I'm not seeing any, sir.
Okay, hearing none, will the council please vote to close the public hearing? Passes 5-0 to close the public hearing.
Move the resolution.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Eric. Further discussion? Hearing none, will the council please vote?
Mayor, one moment, there is a hand that's come up.
Your Honor, this is Ms. Stanger. I just thought it might be helpful for folks to be refreshed, Matthew, if you could remind the council that the city provides liberal terms for repayment should one of the assessed properties need some assistance from the city. We will be cooperative in that. I just wanted to add that for the council's edification.
Thank you, Madam Council. Appreciate that. Is there any other discussion? It's been moved and seconded. And would the council please vote? That passes 5-0. Okay, item 4 is regarding a demolition project on 1260 Northwest 78th Street. Matthew, did we post appropriate public notice?
Yes, we did, Your Honor. That one was published March 23rd, 2020 in the Des Moines Register.
Thank you, Matthew. Doug?
Yes, as we continue to work through our hazard mitigation grant from FEMA, this property has been acquired by the city a month ago. We have started the process for the abatement of the asbestos, and we are now ready to move forward with the demolition of the structure. With that, we had requested bids for the project. We received 3 bids at our bid opening on April 2nd. The 3 bids are shown in the tab that's in your packet. At this point, we would recommend award of the demolition contract to Elder Corporation in the amount of $18,690. Additionally, we would recommend approval of the plans and specifications and the receipt of the bids. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Doug, council?
Hey, Doug, it's a quick question. Just one, there's a pretty substantial gap between the DeCarlo, the high bidder, and Elder, the low bidder. Have we worked with Elder Corporation before?
Yes, certainly. Elder does quite a bit of work, both for the city and within the city on private development work. They've also done a few of the demolitions for the flood-prone property buyout program just recently. And I suspect, I do not know, but they are the contractor of record for the university project in Windsor Heights, just down the street. So I suspect that they are able to take advantage of some efficiencies with having equipment and manpower in the general area.
Thank you.
Move to close public hearing.
Second.
It's moved by John, seconded by Eric to close the public hearing. But before we do, is there anybody here to speak on this item?
One moment, Mayor, let me watch for hands. I see none, sir.
Seeing none, will the council please vote? That passes 5-0 to close the public hearing.
Move the resolution approving plans and specs.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Eric. Further discussion? Hearing none, will the council please vote? Passes 5-0.
Move to receive the bids.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Eric. Further discussion? Hearing none, will the council please vote? That item passes 5-0.
Move the resolution awarding the contract to the low bidder, Elder Corporation, in the amount of $18,690.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Eric. Further discussion? Hearing none, will the council please vote? And that item passes 5-0. Thank you, Doug. Okay, item 5, we have 3 utility rate adjustments for fiscal year 2021. Matt?
Thank you, Your Honor. What's before you on the agenda is the 3rd and final reading of the ordinance considerations for both the water rates, sewer rates, and stormwater utility rate changes. This is based on the City Council's recently adopted budget for the next fiscal year. This includes a 3% rate increase for the water utility and the stormwater utility as a function of our relationships with Des Moines Waterworks and the WRA, and then a 10% stormwater rate ordinance increase, for the stormwater utility rate. And as a function, as this council has discussed over the last number of years, is our enhanced efforts related to flood mitigation, stream bank stabilization, and other associated stormwater related projects. With that, we haven't received, staff hasn't received any comments on the previous 2 readings of the ordinances, and I would recommend your consideration of the final readings for all 3 rate changes.
Thank you, Matt. Questions for Matt, council?
I'll move that ordinance number 1089 be considered for the 3rd time, placed upon its passage and adopted.
Second.
It's been moved by Michael, seconded by Ted. Further discussion? Hearing none, will the council please vote? That passes 5-0. Let the record reflect that ordinance number 1089 is declared to have been enacted.
Move that ordinance number 1090 be considered for the 3rd time, placed upon its passage and adopted.
Second.
Moved by Michael, seconded by Ted. Further discussion? Hearing none, will the council please vote? That item passes 5-0. Let the record reflect that ordinance number 1090 is declared to have been enacted.
Move that ordinance number 1091 be considered for the 3rd time, placed upon its passage and adopted.
Second.
Moved by Michael, seconded by Ted. Further discussion? Hearing none, will the council please vote? And that item passes 5-0. Let the record reflect that ordinance number 1091 is declared to have been enacted. Thank you, Matt. Okay, we'll move to item number 6, which is the general obligation corporate purpose bonds, series 2020A, and general obligation urban renewal public safety facility bonds, series 2020B. Matt?
Thank you, Your Honor. This is the final step in the issuance process for our general obligation bonds, the 2020A and the 2020B series. As the council will recall at the last meeting, we awarded the low bids to both R.W. Baird for the 2020A bonds and Northland Securities Incorporated for the 2020B bonds. So with those awards, the loan agreements have now been updated to reflect those awards. And this will finalize the process, and then the city would close on these proceeds later in April, pending your approval. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions, council, for Matt?
Move the resolution on series 2020A.
Second.
It's moved by John, seconded by Michael. Further discussion? Hearing none, will the council please vote? And that passes 5-0.
Move the resolution on 2020B.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Michael. Further discussion? Hearing none, will the council please vote? And that item passes 5-0. Thank you, Matt. Okay, item 7 is approve the preliminary plat for Shadow Creek North. And Doug, you have that one.
Yes, as you're aware, we've been continuing to work on the development of Shadow Creek development north of Little Walnut Creek. We are at a point now with the rezoning completed that we're ready to get into the specific development phasing within that development. At this time, we have a preliminary plat that's been proposed. It has been reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. It includes 177 acres approximately that'll be subdivided through multiple phases. Majority of it will be single-family residential. We have received construction drawings for the first sets of subdivisions within this plat. So we would anticipate with the approval of the preliminary plat tonight to be in a position of having the construction drawings approved in the very near future. And construction would commence in that development with the hope to have lots available for single-family construction by the end of the year. So at this time, staff would recommend approval of the preliminary plat, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Doug, council?
Move approval.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Michael. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, will the council please vote? And that passes 5-0. Thank you, Doug. Really starting to look great out there with the clearing for the bridge. And when you get out there, it's amazing to see how much land is just back there that you just couldn't see otherwise. Pretty exciting stuff. So thank you. We'll move on to item 8, which is a resolution approving the updated Clive flood response and recovery plan. Chief Rowe.
Thank you, Mayor. Each year we do updates to the flood plan based on experiences that we've learned throughout the year. And then kind of the capstone is each spring we do an annual flood tabletop with staff. We did that on March 31st. We kind of used our real world environment to do that. We assumed that we had limited staff, and we assumed that the senior staff were not able to be in one room, that we had to try to manage this remotely. So it was interesting. I think we handled it very well. And through this, we really didn't have any major changes, just some annual adjustments as we learn more each year and adjust and update for phone numbers and call lists and those types of things. Before you is the resolution to approve it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Council questions for Rick.
Move approval.
Move the resolution.
It's moved by John,
Got me,
seconded
John.
by Ted. Further discussion? Hearing none, will the council please vote? And that passes 5-0. Thank you, Rick. And you are also with us on the next one, item number 9, which is an update regarding the Clive outdoor warning siren system. Rick.
Thank you again. This is the time of year where people start getting interested in outdoor warning sirens and wanting to feel that comfort level that the community's covered. So we thought it was a good idea to give you an overview. The slide that you're looking at, you'll see that kind of right through the middle of Clive with the blue overlaid circles are sirens that Clive controls and maintains. There's 7 of them. Some of you will remember back in 2014, we did a major investment to essentially overhaul all of those, as well as add a new one there at Country Club Glen Park. So we're in very good shape with those. The 2 with yellow circles, those we share with Urbandale. They are the lead agency on those. They do the maintenance and repair on those. We share those on a 50-50 basis. And then the purple circle, we share that one with Waukee, and our agreement with them is we pay 33%. So all of these, since we're all under Westcom, they're all activated through Westcom. And I think we have a very good system, very, very good coverage through Clive. If we go to the next slide, we test the sirens on a monthly basis. And then annually we have a contractor come out and go through and do a more in-depth testing and maintenance of the system. This year, there were 2 sets of batteries that needed to be replaced, which is pretty typical. The batteries will last anywhere between 3 to 5 years. So those have been replaced, and the system is operating as it should. Any questions on the existing layout of our outdoor warning sirens or the way that we test or maintain them?
Council, questions for Rick?
Hey, Rick, real quick for you. I think it was last month or 2 months ago, the sirens went off kind of concurrently, and just wonder if part of a testing, what it was. It went off and then it went on again.
That's an excellent lead into my next slide, Councilmember Klein. What we did is we have a system that we're in the middle of implementing that's going to change the way that we activate the outdoor warning sirens. And what we did a month ago is we tried that. It didn't work. We had a connectivity issue, but that's why we test it before we fully implement it. What this system does is it will take the National Weather Service polygons and use those to instantly activate the outdoor warning sirens. Currently, there's a manual process in which the dispatchers, who could be really busy during a severe thunderstorm situation, they have to be able to pick up on the fact that there is a tornado warning in order to activate those. So there's an opportunity for some human error. This automates that and takes it out. And the other thing it does is it allows us to be more precise. So rather than overwarn, where sometimes an entire county or sometimes areas where the sun is shining and the storm has already blown over or been passed, the sirens are activating, and that causes confusion and frustration throughout the community. So in this example, this is just a hypothetical polygon that I drew, but is similar to the way we see things issued from the National Weather Service. So anywhere that polygon would encompass one of these circles for the sirens, they would be activated, but sirens that are outside of that polygon won't be activated. So it allows us to be a little more precise. And with that, part of our challenge is going to be community education, because sometimes the community, as much as they sometimes they complain that they're frustrated that the sirens are going off when they shouldn't. I'm sure that we're going to get questions about why did the sirens go off on the east side of Clive, but they didn't go off on the west side of Clive. So we're hoping to have this fully activated this summer. We're in a position where we've got 3 or 4 different contractors from different pieces of the system that need to come together to finalize it. But with the current COVID situation, everybody's avoiding those group contacts for obvious reasons.
Other questions for Rick, Council?
Hey, Rick, just Ted. Is there a way to know the difference between a test of the system and the real deal, other than just kind of that we normally test on the weekend or in the middle of the day kind of thing?
Yeah, just that it's the first Saturday of the month at noon. And if we ever deviate from following that system, we will always put out some kind of a media release and social media information so that the community is aware of it.
But it's really just day and time, then there's no way to do it so that the test sounds differently than the real thing or something like that, so that people know that, hey, this isn't a test, this is a real thing?
No, I'm not aware of anyone that does that. At least not in the Iowa area. Everybody's setting it off and allowing them to run a full cycle as they would in a normal activation, using the actual launching systems and the actual cycles they would be using.
Okay, I was just curious. Thanks.
Other questions for Rick, Council? Rick, do you have more to share with us?
Nope, that is it. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, Chief, thank you. Appreciate your good work. All right, then we're going to move to item number 10, which is discussion regarding the Clark Street Rehabilitation Project. And Matt, lead us off.
Yeah, I'm going to start off this evening, and Jeff and Jim are also available if the council has questions. So we had a discussion on this at the last meeting in terms of the current pandemic situation and some hesitation that I had in terms of moving forward with this project initially. The Clark Street reconstruction project is a project where it would require quite a bit, obviously, demolition of the street. We are replacing water main, sewer line in the street in this area. And there were some concerns that I had initially in March of as residents were being encouraged to stay at home and not knowing kind of what the spread of the virus may do in terms of construction crews. Had some hesitation, and we delayed the general contractor from starting their efforts in the middle of March, on March 23rd to be exact. And due to folks also being at home and knowing that utilities were going to be getting torn up and just the impacts. And so with that, obviously the general contractor was anticipating starting a number of weeks ago. This general contractor, as a part of this bid, used up all of his bid insurance, basically, package to be able to bid on this project and move this project forward. So it's unable to do any other work right now because of that. So that was kind of one of the reasons why we thought it would be appropriate to interchange a change order in terms of the costs that he's incurring per week as a result of our delay. And so at the end of the last council meeting, we talked about this a bit, and I know there was some kind of general consensus from the council that at least at that point was a good idea to have some delay and then bring forward this change order. In addition to that, I asked staff over the last couple of days to reach out to Park Street residents that are directly impacted by this project. There was about 28 people that will be directly impacted. They were able to connect with about half of them. And because we really wanted to ask the question, how do they feel about whether or not this project should move forward and the inconvenience that would be associated with that? The indication that we received back from those, about the 50% that we're able to make contact with, is actually they didn't have any concerns or didn't have any issue with moving forward, with the city moving forward with this project, knowing that the inconveniences that this project would cause in terms of their entrance to their driveways being torn up and having to have vehicles parked down the street, that they were okay with it. Now, granted, that was only 50% of those impacted properties that we were able to get in contact with, but so that is another kind of data point that we wanted to introduce this evening as a part of this discussion. So what you have before you is a change order that basically sets aside a per week cost of about $7,200 per week that we continue to delay. Now we've delayed already a couple weeks, and then the pay request that's following that includes a certain amount of mobilization of materials that the general contractor has purchased, and 2 weeks of delay that we've done to this point. The change order itself has a maximum of 10 weeks for that change order of $7,200 a week. So basically buy us time into May. So originally, before we had talked with the neighborhood, one of our thoughts was with the governor extending her closures of businesses and schools through the month of April, that we would correspond with that in terms of the delay in this project. Now with this new data point that we've received in terms of the neighborhood and not having as many concerns of moving forward, I guess that was our biggest hesitation originally, is that I think staff would be comfortable, if the council is comfortable with this, is still having you folks approve the change order, but only having 1 more week of delay, basically next week, 1 more week of delay, give us time to communicate the restart of the project to all of the neighborhood, give some time for the general contractor to get remobilized, and actually moving forward with the project starting the week of April 20th. So we would have maybe 1 more week of this delay. So that is, with this new data point, something we wanted to introduce into the discussion. So we would still recommend approval of the change order and the pay request. We just would not have as many future weeks of costs and related to the delay going forward. And we would get this project started here in short order. So with that, Your Honor, that is kind of the framework of which we're operating under in terms of this discussion, and we'd be happy to get council feedback and direction on this item.
Matt, thank you. You know, I think that a couple of things with regard to this. Initially, as we really started to move into the COVID-19 situation that we're in, part of our concern was also just the issuance of a stay-at-home order and the impact that could have on the project as well, and also with potentially with workers getting sick. So I think really good insight on the part of staff is to say, you know, thinking of our residents, hey, just in case something happens, we don't want your street torn up in front of your house for an extended period of time, more than necessary. So I applaud the effort here, and I appreciate the outreach to our residents to ask them to get their feedback, and obviously we're going to continue that. But I appreciate this move forward, and I think it seems like a reasonable course of action. Council, questions or comments?
Hey, Matt, this is Ted. Oh, sorry, I don't have a way to raise my hand on this since I'm using my phone to call in, so I apologize. Have you talked through with the contractor, you know, if they get things started, and let's say we're 1 or 2 weeks into it, and then for whatever reason the situation takes a turn for the worse, and they have to stop, how will that work? Do we have to pay that $7,300 a week at that point, even if like the governor shuts us down? How does that work?
I think that's a different question, and one I guess we don't know the answer to right now. Basically, if he gets started, the first part of this work is going to be utilities. His intent is to leave as much as the street as possible while he's doing that work and work off of it. So for the first 2 or 3 weeks, he will be doing utility work basically with most of the street there that can be closed up fairly quickly. Basically, what we're seeing though with these shelter-in-place orders is that public works construction projects are being considered essential projects and are allowed to continue, and those services that support them are allowed to continue also. Barring a complete catastrophe, more than likely he's going to be allowed to continue working. So at this time, it's only us as a city making this decision to hold him up. We would work with him, and I know Jim's talked to him extensively. You know, if we get started, something happens, we would work quickly to get things closed up, put back as quickly as possible for that situation. As far as paying him, the only reason we're paying him right now is because we've stopped him and said you can't continue even though we've issued the notice to proceed. If there was some order from the federal government or even the state government that would change that, we would have to look at that time.
Mayor,
Thank you, Jeff.
Excuse me, Mayor, this is Pete. Council had some addition, something to add to what Jeff just said.
This is Ms. Stanger. I think that Mr. May just covered the idea of the plan moving forward, unless the council members have more specific questions. Thank you.
Yes, I can see having a preference to go ahead with it at a time when there's less traffic happening. I just wanted to hear from public safety personnel if they see any issues.
No, Chief Benema and Chief Rowe are on the phone. Chief Benema, do you want to weigh in on that?
Sure. Statewide, can you hear me? This is my first time with the mic on.
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay. Statewide, we're hearing traffic overall is down about 40%. Our calls for service are down as well. We really see a lot less traffic, and it's not a bad time to close the street when your traffic is down almost by half.
Chief Rowe, any thoughts?
No, I don't have any concerns. We've got great mapping, great response from different directions, so I'm not concerned with that.
There are other questions for Matt or for Jeff, particularly on the path that we're looking into tonight.
Or Councilman Klein has a question, I believe.
Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, the only comment I had, folks, was, you know, I know that the neighborhood wants to move forward right now. It's a good time to do that, good weather, et cetera. If we would get into a situation where we've got everything torn up and we get that potentially that call, we have to shut things down, it could change things. I think from a public relations aspect, we really need to stay close with that neighborhood on really letting them know what the situation is, if it would happen there, and really staying close as far as an outreach method right there. Things could change very quickly when you're, you know, right now you want to get going, but if your driveway's torn up and you can't get out of your house, I think we need to really make sure we reach out and keep the information pipeline flowing.
Councilmember Klein, I couldn't agree more. And I think one thing that's been very fortunate with this particular project is, as you all know, is we've been communicating early and often with this neighborhood, and have really established a really good base of kind of communications with one another on this. And I think we're going to use that to our advantage to do exactly that in terms of having, you know, even maybe more regular updates than we normally would with the neighbors involved in this project as we go through this pandemic, and what the response continues to look like, and maybe even what the recovery looks like at some point, and how that may change the project. So we definitely will be top of mind for staff.
You know, one good thing about the starting of this project, and I just want to update a little bit, is phase 1 and phase 2, although it includes the closing of Clark Street, it's basically 104th Street. There is only a couple driveways on there, duplexes that can access from the back in the church parking lot, and the church parking lot itself. And with things being as they are right now, the church is not being heavily utilized, so it's a good time to get through there. Phase 1, 2 takes, you know, anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks. So we will be in this area till we get further down the road and be able to evaluate before we look at doing Clark Street and taking a larger group of people out of their driveway.
Mayor, Councilman Edwards has a question.
John, go ahead.
Yes, it sounds like we've got consensus to proceed on this. Could we just get clarification on the action that we need to take tonight? Because the resolution lists an amount of 72.9, and then the second one is a pay request. So if we could just have clarification on what action we need to take.
Happy to do that. So what the actions would be is we would recommend for the council to approve both actions. So the change order of $72,900 basically sets the per week fee for the delay that's already occurred, and then the delay of 1 more week. It is a not to exceed number, and it is a number that is controlled per week. So basically what we would recommend approval of that. We would communicate to the contractor that we see 1 more week of delay, and then you're ready to go. And so we wouldn't need the, I think, 6 weeks that are left on that 10-week schedule. So we wouldn't expend the whole $72,000, basically half of that or a little less than half of that versus the full amount. We just wanted to have the full 10-week frame in there in case the council wanted to go in a different direction on this and keep it extended. And then the pay app following it includes the mobilization and material purchasing that he's already done, and then the weeks that we've already delayed up to this point. So we would recommend approval on both items, and then based on this conversation and consensus from the council, we have the direction that we need to direct the general contractor accordingly and start gearing up communications with the impacted residents in the neighborhood.
Hey, Matt, just to clarify one thing, the change order is a unit price, 10 units for once a week. We have completed, there's 1 week on the change order, and at the end of, as of tomorrow, it will be 3 weeks of delay is where we'll at. So by adding in through next week, it would be at 4 of the 10 potential weeks at this time.
And I will add, this is Ms. Stanger, for Council Member Edwards. I know you had asked about a force majeure provision. That is not contained in either of the SUDAS or the contract. So we would be relying on common law defenses of impracticability or frustration of purpose, those sorts of things. So in consultation with staff, we believe that this was the best recommended course of action.
Is that something we'll consider on future contracts?
I think that many municipalities and corporations have seen this rise of consideration of these provisions in the future.
If there's no other questions or discussion, I would take a motion.
I'll move the resolution approving the change order number 1.
Second.
It's moved by Ted, seconded by Susan. Further discussion? Hearing none, will the council please vote? Item passes 5-0.
Move approval of pay request number 1 to Mainline Construction.
Second.
Moved by Ted, seconded by Susan. Further discussion? Hearing none, will the council please vote? Item passes 5-0. Thanks, everyone. Matt, Jeff, thank you for your work here, and we'll look forward to Eric's point, really drilling in, dialing in on our communications with the neighbors, not only as we get things started, but throughout the project. I know we're very good about doing that anyway. There's nothing new there, but always good to keep in our optic going forward. So thank you. With that, we'll move to item number 11, which is a resolution approving the temporary employee policy for COVID-19 pandemic response. Matt?
Thank you, Your Honor. This is an item obviously very related to our current response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The federal government, as a part of some of their actions, have approved the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which lays out some new sick leave, emergency paid sick leave, and some extensions of FMLA requirements on all employers, all public employers, and then private employers of 500 employees or less. And what we decided to do is to incorporate all of those federal changes along with some other temporary policies that we've been utilizing at the city level to respond to this virus and this pandemic. To number 1, be protecting our staff. Number 2, continue to deliver essential services to the community. And number 3, also protecting our citizens in terms of our interactions as well. We've implemented a number of strategies to limit staff exposure out in the field in terms of their work efforts on these essential services. But what we have before you tonight is various sections that incorporate what we've been doing to date, and also these federal requirements related to the act that I mentioned. We've been discussing this with our 2 collective bargaining units. They've reviewed this temporary policy and have also indicated and signed off on some memorandums of understanding in terms of their support for the implementation of these policies. One thing that's a little unique for this request tonight in terms of resolution approving this is that we're actually making it retroactive back to April 1st, which was the implementation date of the federal act, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. So just wanted to make that note on something that's a little bit unique in the resolution, but be happy to answer any questions on this if the council has any.
Council questions for Matt? Well, hearing none, I would take a motion.
Move the resolution.
Second.
Second.
It's moved by Eric, seconded by John. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, will the council please vote?
This is Susan. I've lost my screen, but I vote aye.
That item passes 5-0. Thank you. Okay, now normally on the agenda, it shows us moving to reports, but before we do, I'd like to take a moment and just reaffirm with the council, obviously, that last week we lost our friend and colleague, Les Asheim, to a fairly quick illness. You know, Les was very active right up until his passing. In fact, I had the blessing of being able to sit with him back at the beginning of the month of March and visit with him for about 20 minutes, and he was in pretty good shape then, and so that just gives you an idea of how quickly things progressed. But he was active right up really until the time of his passing. He was a great friend of the city of Clive, and I think to the greater Des Moines Metro. He was all about regionalism. He was all about collaboration, and he was passionate about the city of Clive having a seat at the table, as we do today, on boards and commissions and important regional efforts and initiatives that we participate in. So with that, I would ask the council to indulge me for a moment of silence in memory of Les at this time. Okay, thank you very much, council. Much appreciated. At this point, we will move on to reports. And Pete, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you, Mayor. We've had a number of real positive stories that have come out amidst a very difficult time for our community. Dr. Brooke Johnson, I want to give her a shout out because she's my neighbor, an emergency room doctor who serves in a number of different spots in the community. You may have seen the story about her neighborhood and her family coming together to wish her well as she came home after a tough cycle at the emergency room. Certainly all of our first responders, all who serve as staff in Clive or anywhere in the metro, all of the healthcare professionals who live in Clive or who served Clive, we're very grateful for their service right now. So it was wonderful to see one of their team get welcomed home like that, and I'm looking for other opportunities where we can celebrate those people who are out on the front lines right now providing essential services. We also had a real fun story recently, one that we continue to look for ways to repeat and expand upon with our goats. We were through Facebook Live and a couple other mediums, we were able to show some pictures of the goats just having some fun. So give everybody a little moment of goat zen, and we look forward to doing that in the coming weeks as well. We have a few bites from some local media who would like to tell the story about that. The mayor and I are working right now on a statement and a short video to boost morale as well. And our library team and our parks team have launched a number of initiatives for things that kids and families can do at home, and also things that they can do when they're safely using our parks and our trails. To that point on parks and trails, the warm weather is coming. It can't get here soon enough, but when it does come, we know we're going to need to offer some good guidance to folks on how they can use those areas safely so long as they're open. So Richard and I and the parks team are working on getting some signage created that will remind people about good social distancing. And our very sincere hope is, if we can get through some supply chain issues, is that we will have some cloth greenbelt goat face coverings that folks will be able to wear. And we'll share those obviously with staff who would like to wear them. It's a chance for us to first follow the good recommendations of the CDC, but also then to kind of normalize and bring a little levity and fun into what for some people is obviously a very scary situation and an anxiety creating situation. When we see each other out on the green belt and if we're behind our masks, it's nice to imagine that all of us are smiling as we're passing each other by and wishing each other well as we get through this together.
Great stuff, Pete. Thank you. I appreciate the creativity there. Council, questions for Pete on anything at this point?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, this is Ted. I do have a quick question for Pete. So the other day, when we had that beautiful day, it was like 75 degrees out. I took a bike ride down to the Greenbelt, and as you would expect, I guess, and I probably should have thought of this in advance, but it was packed, and I mean uncomfortably so in our current times. Other than signage, I can see that continuing to happen as the weather warms up and people need to get out of their house. So other than signage, do we have anything specific in mind where we can help mitigate that down on the trail?
I'll welcome Richard into this and Matt as well to answer that question. I can tell you that in the places in the parks where we saw that people weren't able to safely use the courts, we went ahead and took steps to sort of limit the people's ability to use them. So the volleyball nets at Campbell Recreation Area, the sand volleyball nets, those needed to come down. And the pickleball courts, the 4 out at Wildwood, 2 of those those nets needed to come down so that the folks using the facility could safely do it. Trail is a very different type of situation. And at this point, we continue to watch to make sure that it is a safe place and discuss what we might need to do in the future. We haven't arrived at a particular policy on that, but we continue to watch it closely to prioritize public health. Matt and Richard, anything else?
Yeah, I'll add into that, and the chief can chime in as well. So a couple things that we're doing, obviously on the enforcement side, the governor, has kind of mobilized local law enforcement to enforce her orders, particularly related to the social distancing and the gathering of groups. One thing I know that the police department is continuing to do is the trail patrol, and also on a complaint basis, we are trying to get compliance related to the groupings of folks to have them disperse. We have abilities to write fines and even simple misdemeanors. Obviously, that is a last resort. But I know that the patrol officers have been given specific direction by police leadership in terms of how to handle those situations. And Chief, I don't know if you want to kind of weigh in in terms of how we're doing things from an enforcement standpoint, because that's really the only other tool that we have beyond, closing those facilities. Chief, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that.
Yeah, Matt, you hit it on the head. All the way from the governor through the director of the Iowa Department of Public Safety, they've asked us, local law enforcement, to help enforce these orders, but they very much stress that they want us to convince and cajole people to follow these guidelines, and that's what we've been doing so far. We have not made any arrests. It's a little easier to police playground equipment, but the trail is a unique challenge because of the way that's laid out, with people passing opposite directions within 6 feet of each other. It's a problem without a ready solution. But we're going to continue to respond to complaints at businesses and in public facilities. And by and large, we're getting great cooperation. Iowa people have been very amazing at how well they've complied with the governor's orders.
Chief, this is the mayor. To that point, have you run into a lot of situations where you've had to educate, or is it really more just kind of a one-off situation?
It's not uncommon for us to get calls with people complaining about seeing people in the park, playing on school grounds or things like that, and we take it on a case-by-case basis. If we arrive and we go out and talk to people, we have not had a situation where once we've talked to somebody that they've been uncooperative. People understand, and they generally follow our instructions when asked.
Good. I think it'd be good for us just to have, if you don't mind, in our meetings, just continue to give us a sense on that. You're really our eyes and ears out there as this is happening. And, you wouldn't think we would have had throngs of kids jumping off a bridge either here in Clive, but these things do happen.
It's too cold for Weaver's boys right now.
As long as they jump off just one at a time and take turns on the bridge.
Yes. Well, so I'm just glad that Ted's 1976 10-speed still ran enough to get him down to the trail.
I'm just taking a beating here tonight.
Are there other questions for Pete while we're on Pete tonight? Okay, Pete, thank you. Let's move down the line then to Ted.
Okay, MPO exec met yesterday. One of the items updated was the Capital Crossroads effort identified stormwater management as a regional priority. And so they had an effort led by Mayor Andaway to develop kind of a regional approach to stormwater management with things, with kind of standardized tools, design standards, checklists for municipalities, things of that nature, so that it would be consistent across each of the different municipalities. I think kind of the primary concept was not to significantly increase costs, but to just change the standards for how cities are managing it. Because what they pointed out was after they pulled a lot of these different cities around the metro, many of them either did virtually no stormwater management or just very minimal. And so they're trying to create much more of a region-wide standardized approach to that. And so that's going to be going in front of the policy committee next week for approval. My understanding is that this was also presented to the MAC, and then the MAC asked the MPO to look at it and approve it. So I think that's going to happen next week at the policy meeting. And then the hope is that it's going to be pushed out to each of the communities around the metro for approval, and then to really take effect by January 1st of next year. So that's the intent. With respect to the STBG block grant, which, if you recall, that's the grant for the Hickman Road 3580 interchange. We had requested $3.1 million for that grant. We were awarded $1 million for that. And really the reason why it was such a reduced number is because this year they had a significantly higher number of requests than normal. They had over $32 million requested in that block grant, and they were only able to award about 14 million of it. So we didn't get the full amount, but we did get $1 million, and that's for the 2024 fiscal year. Yeah, and then last thing is that with all the everything going on, they just reiterated to us that both the water trails initiative as well as the transload facility are on track and are continuing to move forward. So that's all I have, Mayor.
Ted, thank you. So back to the Hickman 35 project. Are you getting any sense internally from the MPO and that leadership in terms of scheduling with the DOT commission?
No, I'm gonna try to get with Todd on that. I mean, you know, we've now got it in the budget for the 2024 fiscal year for the MPO. So now that it is, you know, budgeted with the MPO, my hope is that we're going to be able to coordinate that with the DOT. So I'm going to talk to Todd about that and just make sure we're following up.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Council, other questions for Ted? Okay, Ted, thank you. Eric?
And nothing to report, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, Eric. John?
Nothing this evening.
Susan?
Well, this morning, the Finance Committee for the Bravo Board met for conversation about funding commitments given the impact on hotel motel taxes. And while there's a lag, as our city staff would explain, there's a recognition that those are going to be significantly reduced. So we discussed making a recommendation to the full board that we continue to uphold commitments, recognizing that we're a pass-through organization at Bravo for the funding from the cities, but there will need to be some future consideration in providing guidance to some of the grantees for planning for the future. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And then I just wanted to briefly update on the retail nodes study and some conversation with the consultant, which is led by Confluence, about making sure we don't get too far down the road based on data that would be relevant to pre-COVID without considering COVID implications moving forward. And they do agree with that. But I wanted to make sure we didn't end up in a situation where basically the study had to be redone. So those are my 2 items.
Pretty important with Bravo, Susan, and I'm sure that will be an evolving conversation as we really start to learn more of this broader impact. And I know with the CVB as well, Eric, you know, so I know that's top of mind for all of us, and you've got different dynamics between the 2 organizations in terms of staff and structure, but there'll be much more of this to come, I'm sure. So thank you, Susan, for being on top of that on the Bravo side of things. Any questions for Susan, Council?
I guess one other thing I would add is, while there had been interviewing and selection underway for a communications position within Bravo, that's been postponed and won't be filled for this year.
You got a staff of, is it 3 now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Susan. Michael.
I'll give you a couple things being brief. DART had a meeting. John and I were both on that call. I will send out the kind of the updates and notes on that, the reduced service, as well as some of the closures. And then some of the good news, I guess, on that side is it's really forced the partnership between Uber and DART, and that's coming together nicely. They're going to start piloting a app for that. So it's kind of a seamless in one. Uber, I think it was, if I'm wrong, John, you can correct, Uber approached DART on that to allow kind of the Uber app, I guess it is, but that it be integrated with the busing system. And so they're hoping that will help with some of those last mile trips and some other shortened trips or routes that are due to this COVID. And then I'll just give you a quick one. John wanted me to update you on Metro Waste. It is business as usual. There are a record number of vehicles coming out to the landfill at this point, as you can imagine. Yeah, I think we saw an 800 vehicle count yesterday coming through the gates. That's up from about 500 to 600 a day. And though we don't see record tonnages, our tonnages are slightly up in that area, but of course down in commercial. And also then we have stopped our liquids program and ash program as of today due to Iowa State not using as much electricity. So much more to come on that. As you know, about the spring cleanups have been pushed back in almost every city. There are a couple that are going to still try to stay on schedule. But those are pushed back, so it's going to be city and us really pushing to get that word out to the residents, so they're not putting their things on the curb and preparing for the mayor's cleanup. Those messages came from Waste Management before we even had a chance, or the cities had a chance to make a decision. But most of the cities are falling in line with that anyways throughout the country. That's kind of a brief one. The last, I don't know if it was mentioned last time, we did shut down Bondurant for the household or the hazardous waste facility. We have opened that up to house side hazardous waste, so you can call in and order bins like the old recycling bins, but they're red with lids. We'll drop those off at your door, 2 of them for a price of $25, and then we'll come pick those up. So that has obviously increased 3 to 4-fold during this time, but people are really appreciating that as well. So that's kind of those 2, DART and Metro.
Michael, thank you. Back to the cleanups. Do we have dates certain yet on ours?
We
I've
do
seen
not,
it.
Matt, if I'm wrong. They are on hold right now indefinitely until we figure out what's going on.
It's been
Yeah.
postponed, and this is, and I'll kind of jump in. I was going to mention this in my report too. Is we're ongoing our conversations with Metro Waste. They're negotiating on our behalf right now on our next solid waste hauler contract, and that should be coming back to you to this council in May for approval. And a part of that, so if we end up going with a different solid waste hauler than what we have right now, which is definitely a possibility. What we are working on with Metro Waste staff right now is getting some kind of financial consideration from a current hauler who is responsible for that spring cleanup, and using those resources to bring the cleanup back in the fall, which may be with a different hauler. So I guess staff's intent has been is we're going to have a cleanup. It just may not be in the spring. It may be in the late summer or the fall. But with the potential change in haulers, that's something we're kind of trying to work on in terms of how we make sure we get our value out of that, and compensate potentially the future hauler to get that done for us. And then the city's out no cost, but we get our cleanup done, because those will continue to exist in our future solid waste contracts. It's just a little bit changed this year, so we do not have a date for that. We're kind of waiting and seeing how things go, and then seeing what we have on the hauler side. So, but progress is being made there in terms of those negotiated contracts in partnership with other cities.
Well, just to that point, I don't know what our communication strategy is on that to the residents, but we all know how important this is to the residents. And, because we had dates certain before, they probably got it on their calendars. So we're probably going to need to remind weekly, certainly monthly in our newsletters, but all over every other communication avenue that we have, that spring cleanups are postponed until further notice. So we just want to be over communicate that if we can. And I'm sure you were planning on doing that anyway.
Yeah, and to that point, Your Honor, we've already been doing electronic social media communications, but also it's my understanding that as a result of Waste Management's decision to use their force majeure clause in their contract, in this case, that they are being required to send a mailing out to every resident impacted, a postcard to indicate the postponement of these activities. Am I correct in that, Michael?
That's right. So we have spoke with them and negotiated a postcard to go out. We'll design it. They will print it and mail it to every household that's under our contract now. And we have added every other city that's in our service area to that postcard as well. So that will be coming out very soon. But to your point, Mayor, it's going to take all of us to get that word out. And I think there was a little piece on the news last night about large items and bulky items. And there will be some additional news coverage on the spring cleanups coming up here very soon as well.
Good. Okay. Thank you very much. Anything else for Michael, Council? Any questions? Okay, thanks, Mike. Madam Council, anything for the good of the order?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Matt?
A few items to finish up tonight. Talked about the solid waste contract that work's ongoing. In terms of COVID-19 response, in terms of our financial impacts, staff continues to work on that, and we're ramping up kind of that evaluation of what revenue sources will probably be most likely impacted. We're fortunate to report that I think property tax, at least for this payment cycle, is going to be fairly insulated from any negative revenue impacts. What we were hearing from the counties is that we're receiving the 90 to 95% of collections on that. So we should be in good shape on that major revenue source for the city. Utility fees and rates, those will be, obviously we have a number of businesses that are not operating, but we also have residential usage going up. So we'll be monitoring that to see if there's really much effect there, but we don't anticipate any massive swings. I think the two revenue sources, and we talked about it, and Councilmember Judkins talked about it earlier, related to Bravo, is the hotel motel tax. That 7% tax, where 4/7 of that is distributed out to the CVB and Bravo. They will be dealing with the brunt of that collection going down. I had some conversations with Greg Edwards from the CVB or Catch Des Moines, and they anticipate the occupancy rate to go down pretty significantly in this current quarter that we're in. So basically April, May, and June. That could result in some pretty drastic reductions in that revenue source. And I know that they're also on their end planning for that financial loss, as they're similar to Bravo, where that's their main revenue source. For us, we'll be evaluating that 3/7 that's left in terms of what that revenue impact could look like. It's not a significant number in our budget, but definitely a number that we'll be taking a look at. The other revenue source that we know will be greatly impacted, to the chief's point earlier, is traffic is way down across the state, and so therefore our road use tax revenues will be down. So we've received some preliminary projections from the DOT on what they see for the collections over this next quarter. Could be a reduction in the tune of 25% is what they've advised us to plan for. And so at a staff level, we're going to be working on that to kind of see what that looks like in number form, and what are some adjustments we may make or recommend we make in our budget amendment to compensate for that. So those are the two main revenue sources. As we've talked about in the past, sales taxes is kind of an unknown right now in terms of the local option sales tax revenue, because we are seeing, purchasing up, but a number of businesses closed, and so how that may play out. Now, granted, our sales tax revenue is very capital focused for capital projects, and so we'll make some preparations and some plans if we do see downturn in revenue. What projects would we advise we would hold on as a result of that? So again, doing a lot of work there, but that's probably our main focus at this point, now that we're kind of in the operating in response mode right now, is to understand what those financial impacts may be. Also, to further Councilmember Judkins' point as well, is regarding the University Avenue corridor planning effort with West Des Moines. Doug and I have a call scheduled with the West Des Moines staff next week to just talk through the logistics of that planning effort. As Susan alluded to, is we had been moving forward, and our concerns of what does that market study really look like right now, and what is it going to look like post COVID. So we're going to talk through that with them a little bit in terms of some changes. Also, we had a lot of engagement as a part of that planning project, both with the elected officials together. We had some joint workshops planned, as well as some citizen engagement, our community engagement as a part of that. So want to kind of talk that through and understand, what delays may be needed, and are there certain aspects that need to continue to move forward. So we'll report back on that. Also, for the public safety facility, the site plan submittal was occurred at the beginning of this week to community development, and we'll be talking with the facilities committee next week in terms of those detailed plans. That will be coming before the Plan and Zoning Commission, depending on if we don't have too many outstanding comments to work through in May, and then come to the council in May for the site plan approval. And this is also going to result in some additional engagement with the neighborhood, likely more of a virtual sort right now, unfortunately, but planning on doing some reach out there to the single family neighborhood to the south, in terms of what those plans look like, and managing the buffers that we've been talking quite a bit about at the facility committee level. So that is moving forward in terms of our planning work there. And then also wanted to mention, I anticipate that at least obviously through the month of April, we're going to be holding these meetings, all city meetings, virtually. May is an unknown, but I think at a staff level, we're going to tentatively plan for that first meeting in May to be virtual. At this point, just not knowing what may happen with any extensions, and also any kind of social distancing or groups of 10, no collection of groups of 10 people. How that may all play out may affect decisions we make related to these meetings, but we'll stay in touch on that. And then lastly, the mayor and I will be participating in a virtual lunch with the Clive Chamber. They had requested that to just kind of get an update on terms of the city's response related to the pandemic. And we'll be doing that in a couple of weeks. With that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions, Your Honor.
Thanks, Matt. Council, questions for Matt?
Just a quick question, Matt. Could we get a report over the last several years of the bundled brush level of participation and the costs? It looked to me like it was down.
Yes, I'll see if we have that information.
Thank you.
Other questions, Council?
I have one, and that is, do we have any insight on potential challenges for our first responders over the past few weeks? I heard in the governor's update that there are some communities where they're having some infections, and just wanting to make sure we're taking as much care as we can as a council to do what we can to support their efforts.
Yeah, I'll say a few comments, and then the chiefs can chime in as well. But we're very fortunate, and I kind of knock on wood as I say this, is we haven't had any known exposures or positive cases amongst our public safety folks. The fire department has very sufficient PPE at this point. And then we have an ability to request that PPE as needed. Also on the police side, the chief and I worked through some modifications in terms of our staffing levels, knowing that call volume and traffic volume is way down. We've actually made some adjustments to our patrol staff to limit their exposure by up to 25% by having an officer, if we're plenty staffed on a shift, to actually have an officer go home and be on call and be available as needed if we have somebody go down. So we've been definitely making some modifications to limit exposure as much as we can. And the downturn in call volume has helped that substantially. Chiefs, I don't know if you want to add to that at all in terms of some of the things that we're doing.
This is Rick, I'll chime in. You know, from the fire department standpoint, we're doing a really good job of trying to reduce that risk, sending fewer people in on an ambulance call, trying to limit how many people are exposed. We're wearing N95 mask and eye protection on every patient, regardless of whether or not they're COVID or suspected of being COVID. We had a few ambulance calls where there was really no indication that they might be having COVID-related symptoms, and we were finding those out after the fact. Sometimes patients aren't always as revealing of that information as they should be. So we had a strong enough PPE supply that we've decided to just wear it on every call, and I think that's pretty standard across the metro. We've really, I think the police department's doing a good job, unless it's truly a life-threatening call, of trying to stay back and not go in. We've got good disinfecting procedures on the vehicles and the stations. Both police and fire were able to secure some disinfecting systems that we use on our footwear when we're coming back from a call before we go into the stations. And then beyond all of that, there is a lot of regional planning and stuff going on. Some of it related to how we will handle patients if we get a surge, and some of it how to protect our first responders. Right now, there's the opportunity for, if there's anybody that feels that they have been even potentially exposed, we've got opportunities for housing for them in case they choose to not go home in fear that they may take something back in and around their family.
Yeah, I'll jump in. A lot of those same things that Rick said. We appreciate the fire department has taken the lead providing PPE for police. And we're doing what we can to use as little as possible to save N95 masks and such for medical professionals. As Matt mentioned, we've cut our patrol staff back. Our calls are down, so we're trying to take our extra folks out of harm's way, so we maintain low infection rates among our officers. Our detectives are all working remotely. They've got cars and computers and phones that they're working out of their homes, so we're not congregating in the building. We've stopped having group roll calls in our offices, and again, we're quite fortunate that we haven't had anyone test positively, and we hope to keep that up.
Hey, Rick, do you know if there are any plans to push COVID testing down to the EMS level, where our staff might be able to test patients when they're on a call?
I have not heard of that. I've heard that they may, once the testing equipment becomes more readily available, they might be able to test first responders more quickly, but I've not heard anything about us taking the test out into the field. There is a couple of different protocols that are being put into play. One is a patient assess and refer protocol, where we can go through a series of questions, even on somebody that is positively confirmed to have COVID, that may not actually need to go to the emergency room. So all of the medical directors in the metro area have reviewed the protocol. The hospitals have been involved. And there are some situations where we will know that their signs and symptoms are not indicative that they need to go in and be seen at an ER, because they may be tying up those resources. Now, ultimately, if a patient still wants to go, we will still take them, but at least we can have that dialogue with them. And then there's another protocol going on where, on the 911 end of things, the different 911 centers can do some questioning on the front end. And if somebody isn't displaying any kind of difficulty breathing, they don't seem to be in any kind of an acute situation, maybe they've just called 911 because they've got a low-grade fever and they're concerned, normally the dispatch center would go ahead and page that out. We're worried about, if we do get into a surge, the amount of resources that could take up. So that's another one where the medical directors are all coming together, and the medical directors for the PSAP centers coming up with a protocol where, as long as they meet certain criteria, the 911 center can refer them to just go see their private physician or a lower type care option, rather than tie up emergency resources.
Thank you, Chief. That's great insight on everything that's going on, and I'm sure more to come as this pandemic situation evolves. Hopefully in the negative direction as opposed to the positive direction, but nonetheless, we're going to be involved with it for a while. So thank you for that. Council, are there other questions for Matt at this point? Is there anything else for the good of the order, Council? Matthew, is there any other correspondence then that we have?
No, sir.
Seeing nothing further, then I'm going to adjourn us at 7:41 p.m. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Thanks.